Welcome to Review Every Ship by CitizenCon 2024. The point is to give an update on every ship since some haven't had a video made about them in years, and others, the information is simply too spread out to be helpful in making decisions. Remember, digital ships aren't imaginary, digital ships are imagine-necessary. Every month we do a giveaway to give back to this wonderful community. This month's giveaway prize is going to be either an Anvil Terrapin, or if we hit 6,500 human subscribers before CitizenCon, I will give away an Anvil Carrack. So make sure you share the channel and tell your org mates to come and check us out. To enter the contest, make sure you're subscribed to Billionaire Ninjas, leave a comment on at least one video, and like or dislike at least one video. Winners have 2 weeks to claim their prize. Members collectively have a 25% chance of winning just for being members. So if you're subscribed, consider hitting that join button. And if you're not subscribed, I appreciate you hitting that subscribe button. For the full giveaway details, make sure you visit our Billionaire Ninjas Discord or our social media at Ninjas Leap. Today, we continue our trip through the RSI manufacturer, and the next ship is one you've been waiting for, the RSI Polaris. At a pledge cost of $750 standalone, $675 war bond, and was $625 at concept. Cost in game is unknown. The Polaris is time limited for purchase. The ship is still in concept, so there are no rental prices either. If I had to guess, the in-game price, I would assume it would be the most expensive ship currently in game as of 3.24.1, around the $70 million mark. The Polaris is a nimble Corvette-class capital ship that packs a powerful punch with a full armament of turrets and torpedoes. Intended for use as both a naval patrol ship and to serve as the flagship of militia operations, Polaris has the capacity to perform search and rescue operations, light strike missions, and general security patrols. The Polaris includes the facilities to repair, rearm, and refuel a single fighter, light bomber, or support ship. The RSI Polaris.
People keep asking if I'm back, and I haven't really had an answer. But now, yeah, I'm thinking I'm back.
For measurements, the Polaris has a length of 166 meters, beam of 82 meters, height of 35 meters. The ship is a size 6 capital class. For crew, the Polaris has a minimum crew of 6 and maximum crew of 14. The Polaris carries a total of 576 SCU in its cargo bay, and it does have a hangar for a ship. The claim time for the Polaris is unknown, but because it's a capital and it's going to be a combat ship, I would expect it to be above an hour. Expedited is above 30 minutes, and expedited fee should be above 45,000 credits. For speed, as of 3.24.1, the Polaris has an unknown SCM speed and unknown nav max speed. I would also assume that because this is a more offensive ship, and it is said to be the tip of the spear for a combat fleet, I would guess it's faster than an 890 jump, but slower than an A2 Hercules. So maybe a bit less than the Carrack in SCM speed at about 135 SCM, but much slower than the Carrack in nav max speed. So there I would say it's a bit closer to the Hammerhead, but slightly lower at 930 nav max speed, because the Hammerhead is indeed a lot smaller, but we still don't know which will be faster. A quick note before we continue: this ship has technically been in game already and has stats that show on certain websites, but there has been correspondence from CIG that the numbers that show now are just placeholders. So if you're wondering why I'm not using those numbers, there you go. We'll have the ship within a month, so you can see whether I'm right very soon. But just to give you an example, the current hull HP says 100 million, which would be higher than the Idris, which we already know is not true. So again, those numbers are not necessarily correct, and they are just placeholders for now. So my numbers are as good as any. Maneuverability for the Polaris, unknown again, but because it is a torpedo-based capital ship with much better turrets on the way, I would say it would normally be below average, but because of the purpose of this ship, I would say it's gonna be a little bit above average. About the maneuverability of the 600i currently, although I do think the 600i will be better with maneuverability after its rework. For weapons, the Polaris comes stock with one size 5 laser cannon man turret on the nose, 3 size 3 laser repeater man turrets, 2 size 4 laser cannon remote turrets, and size 4 missile turrets with 12 size 2 infrared missiles, along with the 16 size 3 missiles split between 2 launchers, and 28 size 10 torpedoes split between 2 racks. A unique thing about the Polaris is that at least one missile turret will come automated stock. There just isn't enough information to figure out which one it will be, but my guess is the size 3, because it's the only one that doesn't say manned or remote and simply says anti-fighter. Another note about the weapons, and this is a long one, so strap in. This will surely be the craziest topic in the comments because the ship is so close to release, and there have been leaks, no doubt. The nose turret weapons are changing to bigger weapons, and essentially there are 3 trains of thought about how these weapons will change. Some believe a upgrade to a size 6 turret because they found it in the code. Others believe a single size 7 turret because it fits more with the weapons already available in the game. Then there's me, and maybe a few people that are as crazy as me, because see, I think this will be either a triple size 7 turret or a quad size 7 turret. I know you're already saying, what mushrooms are you on? But hear me out just for a second. I watched tons of videos on this and the Perseus kind of close together to try to get a feel of what CIG views as a sub-capital punching weapon, which the Perseus is supposed to have, and a capital punching weapon, which the Polaris is supposed to have. In the Perseus video, the ship crew goes out of their way to say that the size 7 dual turret is for subcapitals and not capital ships. Then in the Polaris update video from the Ironclad is Rad, just 4 months before recording this, John Crew said, and I quote, "Another thing we are looking at in the future is actually doing some more upgunning of the turrets. So it's not just a torpedo boat. It can sort of hold its own against other capital ships with its turrets." So from those 2 comments, one could assume either they buffed the size 7 dual turret to hold its own against capital ships, or that the Polaris has a bigger turret. What I'll add is, it seems that CIG is balancing things to be a bit more compact, so perhaps the size 8 turret is out of the question that I mentioned in the other video. But I think the Polaris would be an excellent place for the first ever triple size 7 gun turret, or size 7 quad turret. Feel free to disagree. Now, I wouldn't complain if they were size 6s or just a regular size 7 turret either, but it would definitely mean that CIG is not being consistent with their weapons logic. It's also rumored to have other PDS turrets, which I've already said in a previous video that I think all capital ships should come stock with, but we will soon find out. Whew. Moving on. The hull HP for the Polaris is unknown, but I do think it will be a bit below average in this category when it's all said and done, but only in its own class. What I think will happen now is when we get it, it will have somewhere around 350,000 hull HP and be the most well-armored ship in the game, outside of the Idris, of course, until we get a few more combat capitals, and then I think it will slowly even out to be slightly below average among the combat capitals. The shields on the Polaris are unknown, but considering the size and roll, I'm thinking the Urkel probably has this one pretty close to correct. A bespoke Polaris shield, which are quadrant type shields, the shield pool being about 780,000 and regenning at about 4,000 HP per second. For ship parts, the Polaris has 1 capital radar, 2 medium computers, 1 capital power plant, 1 capital cooler, 1 capital shield generator, 2 large fuel intakes, 2 medium fuel tanks, a large quantum drive, a large jump module, a large quantum fuel tank, and I would guess the medium fuel tanks will become large at release. For hydrogen capacity, as far as in-class range, it should be top 10 in the game. This is a patrol ship and is meant to constantly fly around. When it comes to quantum fuel, it should be a similar story. It should be close to the highest in the game. The quantum capability for this ship will definitely be interstellar, meaning you can travel anywhere in the system multiple times without refueling, and will also have fuel to make it to your next destination in a neighboring star system. This is the highest standard for long-distance travel. Some special features and amenities for this ship. With the massive size of this ship, there are a lot of amenities, and we don't have to assume which ones they are because a lot of them have been either announced or shown. For interior amenities, have the shared bunk area for each member of the crew, except the captain and the CO, who would have separate rooms and offices. The rest of the crew would have that shared area for bathrooms, suit lockers, storage, and weapons locker, and a habitation area with a kitchen, a dining area, and a recreational area with a pool table and a couch. We also know for certain this ship has 2 medical beds inside of it. We just don't know what size, but my guess is 2 tier 2 medical beds because tier 1s seem to be reserved for medical ships. In addition to all that, the ship will have a brig for storing prisoners and a torpedo room for a full game loop where torpedoes will need to be loaded manually. A full armory, a docking collar, a cargo elevator, and last but not least, that hangar that can fit at least a ship the size of a Sabre. My preferred loadout for the Polaris will come later once the ship is made flyable. A quick shout out to my members. My First Ninjas, StarTouch and Rob. My Hokage, Old Weeb. My Jonin Ninjas, Radium TX, Paline Tan, The Solid Exodus, Damon Danielson, Dark Wolf God, ETL in Space, Sean Phillips, and Rage 1. Then my Chunin Ninjas, Raygun 972, Walk on Your Side, Scorpio King 3, Soul Galaxia, Meat Salad, Praetorian, J Solus, Waterfox Studios, and Sand Chimera. Of course, thank you to all my other members from every level who are all listed at the end of the video. As always, membership is never required but always appreciated. You help make this YouTube dream even more possible, so thank all of you. A special thanks also to all my gifted subscribers that came from the live stream where ETL in Spades and Sand Chimera did a massive member donation. The gifted streamers don't show up in my feed yet, so you will get your shoutouts in another future video. Now it's time to rate these ships. A rating I rate from 1 to 10. My 1 is only buy if you have a unique reason that is specific to you or because you like the look of the ship. My 10 is if you have the money, these ships are almost guaranteed to be useful to you in the game. A 1 doesn't mean that the ships are useless or ugly, and a 10 doesn't mean that the ships are perfect. Just remember, these are just our ratings. Please give us yours in the comments below. And man, I know y'all are going to tear us up in the comments. I can only imagine this war paint y'all are wearing and the bulletproof vests necessary to enter the comments on this one. But go ahead, bring it. I got a lot of time after CitizenCon to go through it. My rating for this ship is a, wait for it, 10. Let's start with what I like about this ship. Well, the Polaris is the everyman's capital ship. I don't think a single ship in Star Citizen represents more of what Star Citizen is all about than the Polaris. It's in the Goldilocks zone of capital ships and mobile bases with a crew count of 6 to 14, which allows you to slowly scale up your crew. It has nearly every amenity you can think of for a non-luxury ship. It has tons of weapons, both manned and remote. It has tons of missiles, tons of torpedoes. Its cargo elevator, cargo bay size, and hangar show that the Polaris is a true multi-role ship. It will be faster and more maneuverable than most ships this size. Let's not forget at least 2 medical beds. It will be a tough ship that's difficult to take down, and it will truly punch above its weight class, unlike some other ships that get that moniker. This is the ship that people want to be a captain on and a crew on, because it just looks like fun to be on. It can go anywhere in the verse, and it can take on pretty much any challenge in the verse. When I think about the Polaris, it's one of the few ships in the game where I think, if I step onto that ship, the possibilities truly are endless. Now with that said, my issues with this ship and how I would fix them. The Polaris is $750, and no matter what anyone paid for it, that is still a huge barrier to entry. Even though its starting price of $625 back when it was at concept is lower, it's still pretty high. However, if you've done CCU change, you can get it down to the 400s, but that's the thing we do in Star Citizen. We find a way to justify the fact that we just spent $400 by saying, it's okay, we saved $350. And sometimes we don't stop to smell the $400 leaving our wallets. But I digress. That's not the Polaris's fault, that's mostly ours. But the Polaris is a sneaky little devil when it comes to wallets, because even with that barrier to entry, I know so many people who have one of these ships. And so that's another thing that bothers me. The number of people that have this ship. It's a fan favorite, it's a commonly purchased ship, and it's going to be everywhere in the verse on day one. You won't be able to turn a corner in the verse without seeing a Polaris. So if you're looking for originality in your fleet, this ain't it. But again, that could just be me and the people I know. Perhaps there's people out there that don't know a single person who owns a Polaris. Another piece of the problem puzzle with the Polaris is the struts on the cockpit. CIG, I know at some point someone made a design choice to put struts on RSI ships. That's fine. But it's the future in this game, which makes them possible to be invisible from the inside, translucent even. In the sci-fi world, I'm certain we can think of an imaginary material that allows me to not have to miss the details of space because of the window structure. I will say this, the captain's chair has the best view, and at least they didn't include that middle strut, which is the worst strut of them all. I'm looking at you, Connie. Another issue with the Polaris is, well, it's not an Idris. The Idris is larger, has a size 7 gun without that controversy of whether it will be or won't be. Sure, it doesn't have the size 10 torpedoes, but it has a size 10 gun that can kill more than one thing when it fires. It also has more amenities and more rooms than the Polaris, and is just as coveted as the Polaris. It sells out every single year and every single time it's sold. And before you say it's twice the cost, well, the Idris M was $1,000 at concept, which is the best version and only $250 more than the Polaris. Not to mention, the Idris is tougher and can carry multiple ships in its hangar. And the Idris has that cool shooting range and massive meeting room. My last issue with the Polaris is it's simply too large and the crew requirement is too high. There are tons of people who simply don't want a capital ship. They were never going to like the Polaris because it's a capital ship. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the people that want to play Star Citizen with a smaller group and run a capital. The people who will most likely opt for a Perseus instead of the Polaris simply because of the minimum crew on the Polaris being 6. It's not difficult to understand why some people would have issues with that minimum crew amount. How many people can you find on any given day that want to be crew on your ship rather than fly their own? Even still, how many of them are willing to be the engineer or sit in a turret the entire time rather than be the pilot or co-pilot? Or maybe they want to do that vice versa and they're conflicted about the others. But even if you switch roles, that is a whole other discussion, because maybe someone doesn't want to switch roles. Either way, you get how people could have an issue with the larger crew size. So why is this ship still a 10 with all my issues that I listed here? I must say, the first part of why it's a 10, everything I just said are issues, I feel like I had to spend the most time on. I was searching for flaws for hours, and these flaws I mentioned aren't even that bad. So you might ask, why list them? Well, because this is what the people say when you bring up the Polaris, and they have an issue with it, so I wanted to tackle those head on and explain it to you. And what I'm going to explain to you is why this is the best ship in Star Citizen. Yes, I remember what I said about that other ship a while back. Guess what? I've reviewed 200 ships since then. I'm allowed to change my mind based on new data, and it has indeed been changed. Let's talk about price. Well, like I said, you can CCU to it and get it much cheaper than $750. I have yet to meet a single person who has actually spent the entire $750. I'm not saying they don't exist, I'm just saying I haven't met anyone that has done so. But even still, that doesn't matter. This is the only ship you will ever need. I either think it has everything you need or it can fit whatever you need in its hangar or cargo bay. If what you need is another larger than small ship, go do a few military contracts and buy one in the game, because any mission that involves pew pew and boom boom, this thing will be an absolute unit in carrying out and will make a lot of money from. I say that as someone who is wing commander, creeping up on Praetorian in Concierge, so I know a thing or two about spending money on the game. If I started over again and this ship was released, I could easily see myself owning just a Polaris and F8C to fit in the hangar, and a Vulcan to fit in the hangar when I don't need the F8C. That's how much I respect what the Polaris can do. Also, when it comes to how many people own it, it's not really going to matter if they don't know how to use it effectively, crew it effectively, and what ships to pair it with for every engagement. When it comes to the struts, well, that is still a problem. However, the ability to fly third person almost negates it, but also you get used to the struts over time. Hey, it could be worse. It could be a mail slot. Then let's talk about the crew requirements for the Polaris. I hear this all the time. More specifically, this sentence or a similar version of this sentence. I don't want to have to crew an entire Polaris. It's too many people when I could just get a Perseus and use half the amount of people. Hey, I could even get 2 of the Perseus and run it with 3 people each instead and have 2 Perseus to your 1 Polaris. I don't know if that's how everybody sounds, but that's what it sounds like when I hear it in my head. There will be at least one person in my comments that says this, and that's fine. But let's eat their lunch anyway. The Perseus is a great ship. I reviewed it. Go check out that review. I like that ship, and better yet, I own that ship. But it's not sniffing any of the capital class ships, more specifically not sniffing the Polaris for 3 key reasons. There are more, but I'm only giving you 3. Reason number 1. Capital parts in the Polaris and scaling. CIG has stated that capital parts are going to be so much better than large parts, that even 3 large parts wouldn't even match a capital component. It's not a small difference, and scaling also goes with effectiveness. The reason you take a capital ship instead of a subcapital is because capital ships can do a lot of what subcapitals do, but that doesn't really work the other way around. 2. Combat capability. Not only will the Polaris outrange the Perseus by thousands of kilometers, in both firing range and radar, It will be substantially tougher with capital class armor and capital class shields. Not to mention the Perseus is said to be, by CIG, too weak to go against capitals. Its main focus is medium to large to subcapital. The Perseus will be weak to fighters as well. And guess what the Polaris can keep in its bay? A Scorpius and multiple Furies. Not to mention what it can fit in the cargo bay. I hope you're seeing the point. Number 3, NPC crew and AI blades. People keep acting like AI blades and NPCs are never coming. I get it, we've been waiting a very long time, but they are coming. And when they arrive, the "I can't crew it" conversation will become a distant memory. Well, maybe not for the Javelin. We'll always have questions about the Javelin, but the Perseus comes with an AI blade. That is the ship we're talking about comparing to the Polaris, and it already has some of the technology. That should show you how effective they can be. The same way the Polaris has an anti-fighter missile turret. I get it. If you want a smaller ship because it's simply smaller, go for it. That makes sense. But the crew argument is more of a simple personal preference than a win or lose battle. Lastly, let's talk about the Idris. Every point I stated is correct. Yeah, the Idris is a very nice ship. So I really only have one argument for why the Polaris beats the Idris. Well, 1.5 really. I can have 2 Polaris for the price of 1 Idris. And in no way, shape, or form is 1 Idris worth 2 Polaris. If I CCU correctly, I could get about $500 for the Polaris within only a few months of doing CCU change. The Idris can't CCU. You can try using the gray market to get a discount, which, sure, great if you want to take that route, but it's risky. And if you did, so can I. And then pay even less for the Polaris and get it for $375 and buy 3 of them. So that's out the window. Oh, but wait, I said $1,000 earlier. Well, that only applies to early adopters of the Idris M, which most people do not have. The overwhelming majority of you have the Idris K or the Idris P. The Idris P being $1,500, and then that $300 and what? $300? $350? How much is that Idris K kit? It doesn't matter because I am now squarely sitting at 3 Polaris for the price of your very overpriced Idris. That's it. That's the argument. Oh, and my other half of an argument. The Polaris can do 90% of what the Idris can do for half the price, even without the CCUs and credits. Some of you need that extra 10%. I get it. Go for it. But most people don't need that 10% and never will. Oh, and did I mention the capital radar on the Polaris that allows it to outrange the Idris in a fight because the Idris only has a large size radar? Nah, I'll save that for the Idris versus Polaris video. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that one. That one's gonna be fun. So, I've said a lot. Easily one of my longest ship reviews, and it'll probably be up there for a very long time. So who is this ship for? This is for anyone who even remotely wants a combat capital ship. If you're primarily focused on industry, you might want to grab the largest ship in your particular industry, but even still, something will have to protect it. I imagine using the Polaris as my base, my home, my, hey, let's hop into Star Citizen ship. It's the ship I will most likely end up flying the most when I'm playing with other people, whereas my industrial and commercial ships, I'm most likely going to end up using NPCs or AI blades. This is my warship, but also my social ship, but also my fleet defense ship, my fleet attack ship, my bounty hunting ship, my combat medical ship, my pocket carrier, my Fury launcher, my Razor launcher, my arrow launcher. Did you know you could fit like 10 arrows in there? It's my prison ship, my hangout ship, my everything ship. I know there is no I win button in Star Citizen. I know there is no I win ship in Star Citizen. I know that every ship will eventually be balanced. But man, I'll tell you, owning the Polaris sure as heck makes you feel like you won. And I'd say that's enough. I know you're here for our rating, but if you really want a ship, go buy it. We won't stop you. Or even better, all ships can be earned in-game once the game releases, and some you can purchase in-game right now. These are just our ratings, but when you spend, it's your money. My opinion, if you're spending money on Star Citizen and you're only willing to make one large purchase, this is it. If you're a big spender in Star Citizen and are wondering what your primary ship should be, this is it. And if you're simply asking me what the best ship in Star Citizen is, this is it. All right, That is it for this one. Shout out to the members. Thanks for spending your time with us. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.